Constitutional Amendments and Intergovernmental Affairs Committee is called to order. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representative Baker, Representative Bivens, Representative Branscombe.
Here.
Representative Callaway.
Here.
Representative Chester Burton, Representative Decker,
Present.
Representative Gooch, Representative Hancock,
Here.
Representative Imes,
Here.
Representative Cook, Representative Lewis, Representative Lockett,
Present.
Representative Marzian, Representative Roberts,
Here.
Representative Hodgson, Representative Johnson.
Present. So we do have a quorum, and we are constituted to conduct business as we've been doing lately. I'd like to start us off by opening with a prayer and the pledge, and I've asked Representative Scott Lewis to lead us in prayer, and then if you join me in the pledge afterwards. Thank you. Before we get into the agenda, just a couple of the administrative announcements. First, remember that when you're speaking at the desk, or if any of the members are speaking, please make sure that your microphones are on, and also make sure that your phones are silenced or turned off at this point. Do any of our members have any special guests they'd like to recognize this morning? Yes. Representative Roberts.
I wanted to recognize Caleb Weist. He is a sophomore at Covington Catholic High School. Has come down to be a page for the day, so members of the committee, make him feel welcome.
Welcome. Appreciate you coming today. All right, anyone else? Then we are going to get into the agenda. The first item on the agenda today is House Concurrent Resolution number 67, sponsored by Representative Emily Callaway. If you come forward, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Emily Callaway, and I represent 37th District, which is Louisville, portions of Jefferson and Bullitt.
Very good. Before you proceed, if you'll raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So this is a concurrent resolution. We want to establish a Kentucky Restoration of Voting Rights Act task force. We want to make sure that since this is a foundational principle of American democracy to vote, it's a civic responsibility to be engaged. We want to make sure that this gets the attention that it deserves, that individuals who have spent time, have served their time, have exhibited evidence of rehabilitation, ready to re-enter society, that we consider very seriously whether or not they should be allowed to have these civil rights.
Motion on the resolution.
We have a motion and a second. We do have a question. Representative Callaway, would you like to continue or hear from the committee?
I'll take questions.
Very good. Representative Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the bill, the resolution. I was just in the Senate Standing Committee on Judiciary, and there was Senate Concurrent Resolution 89, which is the same title of House Concurrent Resolution 67, which is before us today. Can you explain, number one, if there are any differences between those two resolutions, and if there are, what are the differences?
Sure, there are, and I have been working with Senator Higdon. We came at it a little bit differently, but we've been consulting, and we'll kind of go with the will of the body about it. But basically, his has 5 of each from the House and the Senate, and I've gotten more specific with mine, 2 members of the House, 2 members of the Senate, and then I dive in and have a representative, the Secretary of State or designee. I have the Attorney General or designee. I've got representative of the Department of Corrections. I've got a representative from the State Board of Elections. So we're expanding out. We're also bringing in representatives from organizations who are advocating for citizens' rights to be restored. So I've got 2 of those listed. And I understand within that discussion there was talk of expungement, that we can entertain that. This is something obviously that needs to happen. We're coming at it 2 different ways, but as long as the task force is established and we keep moving the ball forward and we have something to present in 2026, I think we'll work together and figure it out.
Quick follow-up, please. Yes, there was actually a very long discussion about expungement in the committee meeting just now. And it was brought up there in terms of the need, not just for the resolution, but for the task force as well. So I appreciate your work on this. I actually happen to like your version better. So I do hope that the House version goes forward. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representative Baker, Representative Bivens,
Yes.
Representative Branscombe,
Yes.
Representative Callaway,
Yes.
Representative Chester Burton, Representative Decker,
Yes.
Representative Gooch,
Yes.
Representative Hancock,
Yes.
Representative Hodgson, Representative Imes,
Yes.
Representative Cook,
Yes.
Representative Lewis,
Yes.
Representative Lockett,
Yes.
Representative Marzian,
I'd like to explain my vote, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Thank you. I'm going to vote no. I think our Secretary of State, Michael Adams, has done a fabulous job, and we can leave him to watch over any kind of voter fraud, which has not been proven to have occurred in this state anywhere or across the country. And I think this is unnecessary and probably expensive, so I vote no.
Representative Roberts,
Explain my yes vote, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, right now for voting rights restoration, you mostly for most offenses you have to get the offense expunged. The standard is clear and convincing evidence. It's entirely up to the discretion of the court, and in many instances it leads to people having to go through an expensive, long drawn out legal process. So this task force, I hope, will get us to a position where we get back to where once people have served their sentences, that they are getting their constitutional rights back, including the right to vote. And hopefully we can have a conversation ongoing about the nature of our criminal justice system and see about reforms that we can do to be more smart on crime. So I'm a hard yes. Thank you.
Representative Johnson.
Yes. So the resolution does pass with favorable consideration. Congratulations, Representative Callaway. We'll see you on the floor. Next item of business on the agenda is Senate Bill 126, sponsored by Senator Chris McDaniel. Welcome, sir. Would you please, before you introduce yourself, please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. If you'd introduce yourself, and the floor is yours. Oh, by the way, this is a bill for discussion only today, and the reason for that is that I'm not against voting for this bill, but it's the fact is that we don't actually consider constitutional amendments until next year, and it seems a little premature to me to have votes on constitutional amendments when we don't know what amendments will come up for next year. So it's been my choice in the matter to say that we will have discussions, but we'll vote next year. With that, Senator, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. State Senator Chris McDaniel, 23rd Senate District, which is northern Kenton County. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for hearing this constitutional amendment today. Sometimes in the hustle and bustle of life, we can forget what happened just a few short years ago. So I thought for a minute we could go back to December of 2019 and some headlines that were exploding across the Commonwealth. First, notorious Northern Kentucky murderer could walk free after Governor Bevin commutes his death sentence. Second, convicted child rapist Michael Schottel sentenced to 23 years in prison, but quickly following Bevin pardons convicted child rapist in Kenton County, man not required to register as sex offender. Campbell County political activist and convicted drug trafficker receives unconditional pardon from Governor Matt Bevin. 5 convicted of murder among those pardoned by former Governor Matt Bevin. GOP prosecutor took donations from sex offender's family, then pressed Bevin for a pardon. Bevin's pardons include convicted killer whose brother hosted campaign fundraiser for him. And finally, Bevin pardons man convicted of decapitating a woman and stuffing her in a barrel. But then on the federal level, just a few months ago, FBI Agents Association blasts Biden for commuting sentence of cop killer. Biden grants clemency to Cash for Kids judge, a scheme whereby youths were sentenced unnecessarily by a judge and sent to a private prison where countless unspeakables had happened to them. And while we are talking today only about a state-level power, those federal examples are illustrative of even more what can happen across party lines. Section 77 and 240 of the Commonwealth's Constitution grant the power to pardon specifically to the governor. The last time those sections were visited, they granted a specific power to pardon those who had engaged in a duel. Things in our society have changed dramatically since that time. In fact, as the former senator from Trigg frequently reminded me, the average tenure from a senator from his district was 1 year. That's because in the era of the new Constitution, his predecessors needed a combination of steamboats, trains, and carriages to get to the Commonwealth's capital here in Frankfurt. Many, many things have changed since then, including the sophistication and evenness of our judicial system. The power to pardon allows one person to override the judgment of a police officer, county prosecutor, grand jury, jury, judge, in many cases appellate courts, and in several of these cases the Supreme Court, and impose his or her unilateral opinion upon the scales of justice. But what is the scariest thing about what has happened is not what actually happened, but what could happen. Under this power, any and all persons in prison for any reason could be released, to include death row inmates, with a single stroke of a pen from a governor who will never have to stand in front of the voters. In the words of the former governor himself, we should want there to be integrity in the system. But if we think it's a flawless system, we are kidding ourselves. I can tell you today that based off of feedback I have received from every corner of this state, from people of every political persuasion, from people all across the economic spectrum, the people of the Commonwealth find the judicial process, with all the participants and safeguards I previously described, to be superior to the pardoning powers of one individual. Unfortunately, the previous governor's actions have created a situation where citizens have had to work overtime to try and influence justice after those pardons. And I want to talk briefly about two of those. First of all, a gentleman from up in northern Kentucky by the name of Joe Heil. Joe was the restaurant owner at the place where Deborah Pooley was a young manager. In 1989, a man named Gregory Wilson kidnapped Deborah Pooley 1 month after he had served 12 years in Ohio for rape. While his girlfriend drove them around, he repeatedly raped her in the back of the truck. He then strangled her to death and threw her body out into a field in Indiana, where it was discovered 2 weeks later infested with maggots. He was on death row when the former governor commuted his sentence, and ultimately he became eligible for parole last year. And but for the actions of Mr. Heil and his appearance in front of the parole board and his ongoing advocacy, this individual could very well have been walking free in northern Kentucky today. I'd like to speak about a young girl named Chloe Randall, who was a classmate of my daughter at Ryland Elementary School. This is a letter she sent several years ago when I had this bill up. My name is Chloe Randall. This is something that means a lot to me, as I was raped at the age of 12 in Fort Mitchell. My predator is one of 8,993 registered sex offenders in Kentucky. He was 28 at the time. After 3 long years of the trial process and the convictions he received, a total of 75 years in prison, I was finally able to be a kid again, knowing he was locked away and not able to hurt anyone. With me coming forward and letting my mom know, the Kenton County Police Department was able to link that person to other rape cases that were reported prior to mine. Day by day, I can continue to be that 16-year-old child attending my sports, my schoolwork, and my job, knowing he will not be able to hurt myself or others again. I've recently gone public with my story in hopes that others will hear and have the strength to come forward and be able to face their predators. This is the man who was pardoned and will no longer register as a sex offender. However, there are many who believe that the power to pardon should remain intact. That's why this amendment does not do away with this power. It simply restricts the power to the 60 days prior to an election and then between the gubernatorial election and a swearing in. That way, if a governor believes in a pardon strongly enough, he or she can stand in front of the voters or have their party stand in front of the voters to decide the voters' opinions of those actions. There will be no more hiding in the darkness of the last minute of administration. There will be no more allowing the rich and the powerful to influence the scales of justice without recourse from the voters of the Commonwealth. This measure has previously been supported by the FOP, the prosecutors, the sheriffs, and the chiefs of police. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, some of the oldest adages in human history come from the Psalms. Psalms 8:2 tells us that out of the mouths of babes you have ordained strength. I want to leave you with the words of that child rape victim whose convicted rapist was pardoned. A child who was raped by the same man for years, starting when she was 9 years old. The day her rapist walked free after serving less than 18 months of his sentence, she said, "Well, it figures. They always get away with it." I ask you today, is this justice? Or do the citizens of the Commonwealth deserve a chance to vote on a small limitation of the power of one person to decide that murderers, rapists, and drug dealers can get away with it? And thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Thank you, Senator. Questions, comments? Representative Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for bringing this. I have to tell you, this whole idea of pardon power has been one for me that I think for the years that I've been involved, even on a local level and a state level in politics, I don't like it. I don't like it because we see the abuse that you've outlined. We see abuse, rampant abuse on the federal level from presidents. And although we can't do anything on that level, I wish we could, because I think the people in the United States would vote overwhelmingly to rescind the power of pardon from the president. I think they would actually vote probably to rescind that power from the governor. And I appreciate what you've done. I would assume this is probably a compromise on your part, because I believe it should go a lot further. I believe the people would support it to go a lot further. The idea that one individual can overturn a jury's decision, can overturn police officers, can overturn anything at the drop of a signature, to me is undemocratic. It's un-American. And I believe wholeheartedly that it's time that we not only re-examine the whole entire power of the pardon. So I appreciate the bill, and I look forward to next session and voting for this. I do have one question for you, and again, I think I know the answer, but I do want to ask, where does the just the number of 60 days, where does that particular number come from?
Thank you, Representative, and that's an excellent question. So originally I had it at 30 days. The intent was to allow enough time for the dissemination of the information of pardons to kind of work their way out to the electorate. Since I started running this bill, we've allowed for earlier voting, which necessitated the need to move it out to 60 days. And so it simply was a best judgment as to how long it would take for information to be fully disseminated to the electorate in order to make a decision. So that's where it came from.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Any other questions or comments from committee members? Well, Senator, I'll wrap up by saying thank you for your efforts on this issue. It has been my personal consternation to watch there be no pardons, no nothing for almost an entire term for a governor, or the president for that matter. And then all of a sudden, a few weeks after the decisions have been made in elections, all of a sudden we're seeing hundreds and hundreds of pardons and expungements and that sort of thing. this will be a great step towards resolving that. I want to thank you for your efforts, and I too look forward to seeing you up here again next year when we can actually vote on this bill. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you for letting me come today. Members of the committee, thank you.
Is there any other business to be brought before the committee? So, go ahead.
Audience with us today, and I'd just like to recognize her, and that is our district judge, Teresa Miller, McMahon Miller. She's here visiting with me today, and I just like the committee to make her feel welcome, so thank you.
Welcome, Judge Miller. Anyone else? Any votes that need to be registered? I think we had everybody in, but I wasn't sure. We're good? Seeing no other business, this meeting is adjourned.